Hello everyone, my name is Rochelle St. Pierre and this is Halal Mortgages. This video is all about halal mortgages. It's a new thing in the news, but you'll see that Canada's had them for a while now. So we're going to review how halal mortgages work. We're going to show you that they really aren't interest free, even though they may be interest free. They're definitely not free of markups and fees. And they're also going to find out that they're available to everybody. They're not a specific niche product that can only be sold to a specific niche person. They're available to everyone. So I service all of Ontario. I'm a mortgage agent level 2. If you have any mortgage questions, please follow up with me directly. I would love to answer them. If you want to comment, I would love that as well. You can like and subscribe. That helps me as well. If you do like more of my mortgage content, there's a bunch of mortgage videos on my channel already, and I'm going to keep adding more as we go. So let's get to halal mortgages. So let's go over the basics of halal mortgages. First off, they are viewed as interest free. They are not charged interest on the mortgage. However, they are not free of fees or rent payments or markups. That's how they get around the interest charges and make them profitable for the lender. The ownership structure is very different. In halal mortgages, many times the lender owns the home at the beginning. And the structures are designed in a way where the buyers are buying the home from the lender. And this is where a lot of the issues come up that the Bank of Canada, that the Canadian government is trying to work through, because when the lender buys the home, there's land transfer tax, and then when you buy the home from the lender, there's land transfer tax again. Also, there's capital gains tax because over time, with the markups, which you will see, the homes end up having a capital gains tax, so the lender has to pay that. A lot of these fees and extra taxes are trickled down to the borrower, the person buying the home. So you will notice if you do look at halal mortgages in Canada, they are more expensive than normal mortgages are right now, because as I went over just at the beginning, they are not interest free, and you will see how each structure is paid. So there is a markup already, and there's also these additional tax consequences that the lender usually takes on. So they're going to pass those costs down to the borrower. So that's why they're more expensive than a traditional mortgage. Now there are three types. I'm going to butcher these: Ajara, Mashkaraka, and Marabaha mortgages. So the three types. There's three different ownership structures of halal mortgages. And as I mentioned, they're already available in Canada. And you don't need to be a Muslim to get a halal mortgage. So if you really do believe that they are a better mortgage for you, you can get it. In Canada, it is illegal to discriminate against people based off of race, religion, color of your skin, gender, sexuality. All that stuff is illegal. So you can be a non-Muslim and get a halal mortgage, but you will see with the ownership structures and how they are and the cost, you're probably not going to want it unless you really do want to follow the Muslim faith and you want to follow the Sharia law to the letter. So to start breaking down each different type of halal mortgage, we have Ajara. Now, Ajara is basically a rent-to-own contract between you and a lender. That's how it's set up. So you can be a AAA qualified buyer who can just go and buy a home, but through an Ajara style mortgage, you have to do it in a rent-to-own style. That's how they avoid the interest. What they do is the lender buys the property, agrees to sell you that property at a later date, and you have to make installment payments. So there'll be like a markup until you get to that point. After you've made all those installment payments, the ownership of the property is transferred to you. So that's how an Ajara mortgage works. So a Masharaka version of the halal mortgage is a joint ownership version where the lender and the borrower both co-own the property for a period of time until the borrower has made subsequent monthly payments enough to pay out essentially the contract. In other words, they've paid out the lender will release their ownership of the home to the buyer. So once again, we're talking about longer term contracts here. We're talking about almost like a rent to own style, just with a little bit of a different flair. So once again, not interest free, because that lease payment that you're making, it's going to have what the normal mortgage payment would be, plus a little bit extra to pay down the markup that you're going to be charged on these mortgages. So remember that, right? Like the term interest is basically interchanged with the terms markup or profit or rent or lease. So they're not cheaper. And as we saw with these two ownership structures, you don't really own the home fully. In this case, you don't own the home fully. In the other case, you don't own the home at all until you've paid it off. So not exactly a great product for the average buyer, really designed for people who follow the religion. And then we have the third option, the Mahrabaha option, which I believe is the one that's currently available in Canada. This is kind of a simpler structure where basically the bank buys the property and then they promise to sell it to you at a markup price. So I made an example here. The bank buys a property for 300, they sell it to you for 320, and you make installment payments up until you've paid the 320, and then you own the home outright. Once again, if you can approve for a traditional mortgage, why do it this way? This is only really designed for people who follow the Muslim faith and want to follow Sharia law, because as you see, it's not interest free and it can be more expensive, and the ownership structures are very different than traditional mortgage. So you have no reason to go out and do it unless you really want to follow that religion's laws to the letter. And there's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, like it's not interest free and it's not cost free. They are more expensive than traditional mortgages. Now, I briefly touched upon why they're more expensive, but I'll go over it again. So in many of these cases where there's multiple transactions for the same home, as in the bank buys the house, over time you buy it from the bank, now you have double land transfer tax. There's also capital gains on markups. So if I buy a place for 300 and sell it to you for 320, I now have capital gains to pay. And that's what the government of Canada is trying to figure out, right? Like, because these costs, as all taxes in general, when you put a tax on a business, they trickle that tax down to the buyer because they're not just going to eat the cost. They make you eat the cost, right? Another reason why these mortgages are trending incredibly more expensive right now than a typical mortgage, right? Because of these additional costs that happen. You can't avoid them. And the way that the tax laws are written in Canada, that's basically halal mortgages are always going to be more expensive because of that. And I believe that's what they're trying to figure out. They're trying to make it a way where it's fair to have a halal mortgage that is somewhat more competitive, even though many of these contracts do have to be very long time. Like when you set up one of these contracts, it could be almost a 25-year contract. So you might not be saving interest depending on what interest rates are. You might not be ahead, right? So keep that in mind. But yeah, like that's what they're trying to figure out, is how to make them slightly more competitive and slightly more fair. And also regulate. Like without regulation, the sharks will come in and take advantage of these communities. And that's something that I brought up on Twitter, is like, to me, we have to make sure that these communities are protected, because in lending, especially where there's money to be made, people who aren't exactly ethical will come in and offer products at expenses and costs that are going to 100% benefit them and not benefit the client. So we need some safeguards in place on halal mortgages to make sure that the customer is also protected as well. So there you have it. That is my video on halal mortgages. I really enjoyed this video because I like to learn about new types of mortgages and keep my mortgage knowledge updated. It was really interesting to go over the different structures and to see how these things actually work, and that they aren't cheaper than a normal mortgage, and that there are tax issues. It makes perfect sense why the government would want to come in and try to regulate and make some changes to try and figure out how to make it fair. Because when things aren't fair, then predatory lenders come in and take advantage of communities. Hopefully you learned something as well. Once again, my name is Michel St. Pierre, and I'm a mortgage agent level 2 servicing all of Ontario. If you do have any mortgage questions, my Calendly link is in the description below. Thank you for watching.